Hey everybody, TechBilly83 here, coming to you from the train room out on the Techstead. Alright, got an update for you, so let's get right into it. Okay, so this is where I've been spending most of my time and effort here, is on the mountain. The mountain pass and tunnels and river and all that good stuff. So let's start here at the river. As you can see, the river channel itself is kind of more defined. I carved out the foam after I got some of these bridges built and put in place to kind of figure out what the spacing of everything was going to be. I got this concrete bridge here. It's like a precast Walthers concrete bridge. It's pretty nifty. I liked it. Well, I mean, I like it. Wasn't too bad building it. I added some styrene strips to the top to kind of give it some more strength, because really the only thing that was supporting it was the tops of the piers. So if we get in there real tight, you can see how there's just a few little contact pads that were supporting the bridge. And even though it was glued in and everything, it would still kind of sag. It would start to sag, and droop down on both sides of the pier. So I added those styrene strips to give it some rigidity along its, I guess we'll call it the spine, so to speak. And that did the trick. Another trick that I employed when I was building that bridge, you'll notice over there I've got 3 flat cars all lined up. I use those as kind of like a workbench. So what I did is I took the bridge and I inverted it upside down and laid it on top of those flat cars so that it kind of had a consistent surface. I suppose I could have also laid it on the top side. Actually, I know why I didn't, because it's got these side wings. So you see these curved or these angled pieces on the side. That's actually a separate part from the deck, and they glue down straight down onto the deck. So if you were to flip this thing over and apply pressure to that, it would start to spread out. So each of those wings would spread this away outward, and then it would kind of mushroom. So that's why I laid the whole thing on the flat cars, because the flat cars kind of went down through the center, and the guardrails were free floating in air. So it allowed the bridge to settle on a flat surface and dry, so the glue was drying. And then once it was at a point where it was dry enough to handle without it slipping apart like wet spaghetti, I put these styrene strips in there to really give it some strength, and that worked out pretty good. So then, then once I got that bridge built, then I kind of had my major dimension for side to side along the riverbank. So then I was able to carve out the river exactly where it had to be in order to, accommodate that bridge properly and get it all centered up in there. We'll see how it does. I mean, if we get some serious floods coming through here and those, concrete pilings start to get wonky, I got some styrene tubing that I might increase the size of, and we'll probably just go, like, instead of the 4, we'll go 2 big ones, or maybe 3 big ones in. I saw another bridge like that, so I may or may not do that. We'll see. All right, so the viaduct in the background there, the big tall one. So I had originally bought the 2 bents, the single tower, and then the 2 90-degree spans, to pretty much have enough material to kind of like mock up everything. And so far, that has worked out. I've been able to kind of move the tower and the bents around and, span these 90-degree 90-foot sections out and kind of, ballpark where things are going to land and how. And so far, so good. So I've actually got another order of bridges on the way. Another tower there, and then another tower there, and then 3 30-foot sections to go on the top of the towers. Those 2 bents I'm just going to put into inventory for something else down the road. And then, I think 2 more 90 degrees, I keep saying 90 degree, 90-foot deck bridge sections, and then we're just going to end it at the rock face over here going up. So this whole area here I have yet to figure out. I was going to try and use that piece there, that piece that's already got scenery and it's kind of like, you know, got a little rock face on there. I was going to try and recover that in that spot and repurpose it there, but it's just not really working out. I've tried a few different configurations of track. In fact, that's why I have that Bachmann Easy Track there. That's what I use to kind of mock things up. Because I got 22-inch radius curves, 18-inch radius curves, and you know, for the most part, it works out pretty good for kind of prototyping stuff. So that piece is probably going to come out, and I'm just going to build it with, you know, regular 2-inch lifts of foam. So I'll just kind of carve that whole area by hand with, you know, tools and stuff. And then in the background here, you'll notice that green strip of foam there. That represents the Pratt truss bridge, the one that goes down low, that hangs underneath the rails. Hard to imagine, but that's what that's there for. So in the center over the river is going to be that 109-foot Walthers Pratt truss bridge. And then I'm going to have 2 concrete piers, one on each side, and then a 90-foot through girder on each end of that. And that hopefully should span all the way across. And the center line of that bridge is going to be right over the river, and then the piers end, you know, they end up wherever they end up, and then the 90-foot goes as far as it goes, and then that's where we're going to throw in our abutment on each side, and then build the foam off of that. So I'm not going to, like, you know, rack my brain too hard to figure all that out, you know, spacing wise. And then we've got, you know, this here is kind of like our floodplain elevation, and then we've got our fill that they added in for the railway across. This low section here is going to be where our camping cottages go. I showed them in another video. Are they easily available? Yeah, right there. The Woodland Scenics Midnight Motor Court. So it's got these 3 cute little cabins and a little office thing. They're going to go in this spot, and then we're going to have the Walthers Country Store, which is like the little 50s and 60s gas station type deal in front of that. And the road's going to come through there and around, general store in the corner, then a diner, then the town and the sawmill down at the end. All right, so moving back toward this way. You know, some of this foam here is kind of, you know, just in place. Some of it's glued down. But, you know, that's going to be pretty much rock. It's going to be carved rock similar to that. And that's kind of why this tunnel is the way it is there. That's going to be a carved rock portal or blasted rock or whatever. So you'll see this big, giant sloping face here. That's just temporary. So that's going to get its, you know, makeover here at some point. But it's going to be done up all like that. So we're going to figure out how to replicate that rock with the spray foam technique that I talked about in another video. And we're going to do that over here. And my plan is to, you know, have slanted rock, and then in the center have like a big, like, jut out, like a big, I don't want to say a butte, or I don't know, those big vertical rock faces, like El Capitan or something like that. Not as dramatic, but, you know, you get the idea. It's mostly going to be vertical, with a little bit of, you know, variation along the way. And then in this corner here, it's just going to be basically a V ravine or gully up the side of the mountain. So you can kind of see that already starting to form here. This piece of foam here that's got the texture on it behind those screws, that's part of the original layout from the hobby store that this mountain came from, as well as this one here. So basically anything you see up here that's got actual scenery already on it's part of the original layout. So I'm trying to bring it all back together and you know, consolidate it in a way that makes sense. Then that foam up there, that spray foam and that block that's at an angle, that's going to get the Sawzall treatment, and then, you know, it's going to be carved and, you know, dressed up and made into scenery and whatnot. You may notice some holes here in this slab and some screws that are in there. So what we got going on here is I'm using these GRK fasteners. I love these fasteners. They're like indestructible for the most part, and they're usable over and over and over. They're a good fastener. I like them. They're Torx bit, but they got this really aggressive thread. They're basically like the modern day equivalent of a lag. And basically I'm using those to kind of hold this whole thing in. I got to get up on another step here. I got to get more leverage. I might even need a different hand. I don't know. Hang on. There we go. Oh God, there went the bridge. Oh well. All right, so let's just set this down for a second in a way that it doesn't fall on the floor and die. All right, so when I said that the whole side's going to be removable, that's what I meant. So now we can get in the back here and service any derailments or clean, that kind of thing. That battery there, that deep cell battery, was used as weight to hold down the foam while it was drying, and, for the gluing and everything. And then you can see those screws just go back into the holes in the foam there, and they get a little bit tight with this Walmart cordless driver, tight enough. Got spray foam on here. Basically, I kind of use the spray foam as like welding, foam welding. It works. All right, so let's get that back into place. There, and you just kind of give it a little wiggle waggle, and it drops right in. And then we can put the screws in there to make it good and sturdy. And the screws will get some foliage put on top of them to hide them and disguise them and everything. When Godzilla at our bridge there. Oh well, that one's about to go. It's okay. This would be about the 100th time these things have fallen over. Once you build these deck bridge things, they're pretty sturdy. They're solid. It's a really nice kit. A lot of good detail in there. I like that it's see-through. And I mean, I'm like really giving it some force here. It's solid. I mean, also, granted, I glued the heck out of it. I flooded it with that really thin Tamiya cement, so it weeped its way into every little nook and cranny. But I'm pretty confident that once this bridge is fully built and fully glued, that it will be rock solid. And, we don't have to worry about any catastrophes after the fact, with the train falling off. All right, so now let's move on to the mountain itself. So you may recall when I was talking about doing all this foam work and everything and all of the grades going up the hill, I kept talking about mirrors. I said the word mirror, I don't know, 10 million times. And those pieces of foam, which I referred to as the mirror because they were the other side of the rectangle that I cut the diagonal out of, they're down there. I got looking at this and thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? It might be better to use spray foam for a couple of reasons. One, these are nice, shiny, brand new grades that I can use somewhere else. And that somewhere else would be, down there somewhere once we do the loop around, because there's going to be some grade action down there. So that's less cutting and finagling I got to do at that point. The other thing is it's a lot easier to work with spray foam or, this expanding foam insulation. It's basically, it's great stuff, the foam in a can. And it works really good for this kind of thing. Let me get down off my high horse here. That's going to be a culvert. So where the big gully, is coming down off the mountain there through this V-notch, it's going to come across to a big square culvert. And then this is a culvert as well. So there's a little depression up here we're going to go look at in a second here. All right, let's zoom out. I love this new phone. So this is the look I was going for, where we have the, the grades coming up the hill, and we got that, slant, the slope cut in, especially this one here. That looks really good. There were a couple spots where the foam didn't quite expand the way it was supposed to, so I, shot a few extra pieces in there, and it'll get trimmed. But then we're coming around the corner here, and I gotta eat some crow here and some mea culpa, etc. You may notice, so I'm holding the phone level right now, and you may notice that this is a slant, and your eyes are not deceiving you. That is the way it is. So what's going on here is that while the foam was expanding, you'll see that there's not as much foam on this side of the foam riser grade as there is or was in here. I trimmed this quite a bit. So what happened is the foam that was expanding way more on this side, it had more force to it. And it literally popped up the foam. It broke the glue and popped it up. So not a big deal. We can fix it. And that's why this one here and, this whole, everything from the foam backwards is loose, because I've already popped them out. And basically, what we do is we just go down through with the knife and sever, the surface between the foam, the green foam and the spray foam. And then, if need be, we also do it on the other side. This is the best knife in the world. As you can hear it, clicking back and forth. Come on now. There we go. So, you get the idea. We basically just break these, remove it, clean out the cavity, with either this or some other tool, and then just put it back in there and re-glue it. And then once it's glued good down to the, the base material, the MDF here, then I've got a different kind of spray foam. I have the door and window spray foam, which it's not as aggressive when it expands because it's made for around doors and windows especially, because if it's putting this much pressure to, jostle the foam all over and break the bond of the glue, it's also capable of creating enough pressure to crack glass or break your window. So I've got a different type of foam to go in here that, we'll be able to fill this gap and not have to worry about it, rocking and rolling everything. I had a plaster rock sitting in a box, so I just threw it in there, and we're gonna, fill these gaps in. We'll paint it eventually and get it all nicey nice. I started contouring some of this, and then, I realized it's oh darn, I did that thing again where I just get all excited and start ripping and tearing. And I'm like, wait, I should have filmed that. So, and that's another reason why I came back and I added some of these, little blobs here and there to fill in some of the rough spots. So now we can see that, I just take the 12-volt Sawzall here and just kind of do some surgery. Very carefully. And you can kind of see how that goes. So, it's not terribly complicated. And the nice thing about this, working with the spray foam is if you completely screw it up and you're really mad with it and unhappy with yourself, you just get another can and shake it up and spray it in there and start over. You just got to wait for it to dry. So it's a very, forgiving material. Whereas, if you were doing the whole plaster cloth and wire mesh and all that stuff, if it didn't, because that you've got to build a skeleton first. So you can see, the way they did it, they built the foam skeleton underneath, the foam, rigid foam framework, so to speak. Then they put the plaster cloth and the wire mesh and all that stuff on there. So you really got to get it right the first time. And then whatever you end up with after you do all that building and plaster it, that's what you got. Whereas going this route, I like it because, there are do-overs. You can hit the undo buttons, a few times if you have to and get it, dialed in exactly where you want it. Once this is ready, my plan is to coat it with a mixture of Mod Podge and paint. So I'm going to be going consistent with this gray here. I think it works. It looks good. So I'm going to do the same thing here. It's going to get a gray base, and then, we'll paint it up and dial it in exactly where it needs to be. The other thing is, remember the other video there? I showed you that rock that came from the county road out front here where they chip sealed the road. In other words, tar and stoned it. That's limestone that comes from a limestone quarry, like 20 minutes up the road. And it's pretty much the same color as this. So I've actually got a source of real live rock that matches this that we can use to decorate, do all the scenery and everything. So I'm staying with this gray theme all the way throughout. When we get down near that end, near the iron ore mine, and around in that area, things will be different because remember, there's literally an iron ore mine down there, so the geology is going to be a little different. The rock down there is going to be more red in color, so there's more, hematite and iron oxide and that sort of stuff, found natively in the rock. So that will be a whole nother ball game down there. But, for this particular mountain range here, this is where we're going to be. We may even start to transition some stuff over there into another color, more dominant color or something else, maybe a brownish, to kind of match. Because remember, I liked the rock around Little Falls, New York, where it's kind of brown with black highlights and sort of stuff like that. So maybe we're going to treat this river as a fault line. And that's why the river is there, because between these two mountain ranges, there's a fault down the center of the valley. And that's why we have different colors over there. And then from the brown, we transition to red for the iron ore mine. I think I like that, yeah. And then you may notice that chunk of foam there that's on that threaded rod. That's going to be a big rock that the campers have like a rope swing and all kinds of stuff on. So that's going to be pretty cool. All right, so we're just going to kind of swing our way around here and keep talking about this side of the mountain. So this here, this flat, is going to be where the river picks up again. This here was a cut face. This is a factory cut on the foam board, so that's why it's perfectly flat there. You can see where, the knife cut is different. This was the thermal whatever at the factory that sliced the sheet. But I haven't cut this yet because I don't know exactly what the river is going to look like or how it's going to be. So I'm just going to wait until I've got a better idea of what it's going to be like. Maybe there's going to be some more culverts in here. I don't know yet. But this whole edge is going to be where the river is, coming back into view. We're going to, it bends out over there and it's coming this way. And, we got these culverts here, so we can pretty much imagine the edge of the water is here, but it's, we're just looking at the rock. I mean, it's like the bleeding edge of the river, it's like the transition to water is like right in here somewheres. So we're just going to imagine there's water until we get over to here, and then the river is going to actually bend back around, and it's going to be part of this again. And then we're actually going to model, the colored epoxy and the rock and, deadfall, driftwood and all that stuff. Maybe some critters, that kind of thing. And, you'll actually be able to see the water here. Again, there we've got that slope. That's what I was going for and talking about. The bottom here, where it's kind of cut more inward, when I cut that more aggressively, I was thinking that I needed space to glue in rocks, like big chunks of rock and riprap to stabilize the roadbed against the river. If you see any of the rebuild videos from the Norfolk Southern and CSX territory down where Hurricane Helene went through, you see the size of the rock they're dumping in the river. That's kind of what I'm thinking of. Same idea as this color. I'm just going to use, like, we call it crusher run out here. It's what you have if you've got a gravel driveway. It's just rock that makes its way through the crusher, and it's not quite item 4, but it's 1 inch minus, and it's got all the fines in it. So you get 1 inch rock, and then like everything from that rock to stone dust, and it's got everything. So a scoop of that will go a long way for material wise for the scenery. All right, so let's transition over here to another ladder. And actually, before we go all the way up the ladder, let's have a look here and see what's going on here. So you'll see here that the original mountain that came from the hobby shop, the edge of that mountain was right there. Basically where the transition between the canned foam and the scenery is. And there was a big void, a big nothing. And what I did is I took this big sheet of foam here, or square of foam, and put it up against the side of the mountain, kind of traced out the contour of the mountain on it, and then just kind of loosely sawzalled it. And that kind of created a big V gap type thing. So what I did then is I needed a way to support the spray foam insulation in that crevice. So what I did is I took bubble wrap and just some 1/2 inch nails that I had sticking around. These nails, you can see they have a wide head on them. So they worked pretty good to jab through the bubble wrap on the sides of the foam on the vertical face, and then just let it hang down in the center. So there's nothing underneath that. Like, if I can figure out a way to get the phone in there, well, I can't at this point because it's all sealed in, but that whole thing is supported by bubble wrap. But I worked the foam up along the edges so that it's attached, and it's glued to something solid. So you see, that's pretty tough. It ain't going anywhere. But believe it or not, the underneath is bubble wrap. The bubble wrap is cradling it. So the next thing, what we're going to do here is carve out a really, really deep, gnarly ravine all the way up. And then that's going to extend down through both the main line and the mountain line. See, I'm not calling it the lumber line anymore. It's just going to be the mountain district, or the mountain line, because it's going to go all the way down to those mountains, round the corner mountains there, and that's going to come all the way down here and around, and eventually get into some flat country where we'll have the farm scenes that I've wanted from day one, but they got pushed out of the way by urban sprawl. So in here, I'm going to have two 30-foot low-profile deck girder bridges. And those bridges are just going to be carved into the rock with some concrete footers, like little pad feet. And they're just going to be in the rock. So it's going to just be this rocky gorge all the way up, like serious hazardous terrain. And the idea is that when you're down here on the ground, you'll be able to stand here and look up through the girder bridges all the way up that ravine, and like this. So you just have to imagine that it's going to be a big deep V cut all the way up, and it's not going to be straight. It's going to be like all the water's going to be going left to right. There's going to be waterfalls, all kinds of deadfall, big boulders lodged in there, all that good stuff. So that's what I got going on for that. And then, of course, it's going to dump into the river. Now, I don't know if the actual river is going to make it all the way over here. I mean, we're kind of running out of space here. Maybe I could put like a retaining wall here to really push this foam inward enough to bring the water's edge all the way up. I don't know. We'll see. I'm not too worried about it right now. You know, I'm just kind of visualizing what this ravine is going to look like and how as soon as you come around the corner here and, you know, see this, it's going to be a focal point for sure. And then you kind of come around and then see the rest of it. And I think that's going to be pretty cool. In here, this piece here, this is just kind of something I had sitting around, and basically this was a full corner, a full triangle. So like from this point here to that point back there, this was like a full triangle. So I cut the radius out of it and threw it in here, and I sort of pretty much kind of like it. I think. I don't know. This piece is going to kind of be used in here somehow. I haven't quite figured out the perfect alignment of everything yet. That pink piece is just wedged in there. But same idea as the other side of the mountain. This whole section right here is going to be removable. So this will all pop out as one unit so that we can get in the back here and take care of any problems. And you may notice that I put another piece of foam. So over here, on the right of that line of those two pieces of foam, that's the actual road bed. And then this one to the left is kind of like, I guess, a guardrail. I'm probably also going to take a 1/2-inch strip of foam and, 5 inches tall and just glue it so that there's like a 2-inch actual guardrail all the way down, similar to what I do with this PVC molding material. To keep, if there was a problem or a derailment, and you're wondering like, well, what could go wrong here? Well, the cars could string line because we have this 18-inch radius curve all the way through. Then they get to the flat part there, the straightaway. So theoretically, they could string line right on this corner. So I want to put up a guardrail to make sure that they don't fall down in this crevice. It's not like they're going to be lost forever, but it's just going to be a pain in the butt to get them out. And then, actually, let me pull all this stuff out of here so that we can kind of get up in there and see what's happening. So again, I had these, these 12-volt deep cycle batteries here to act as weights to hold down the foam while it was gluing. I put some spray foam down in the bottom there, between the two pieces of foam down there. I got to add some more. I didn't fill it right up right away because, again, the way I had problems out front with the the one side of the curve getting pushed up, I didn't want to replicate that same issue back here where it's harder to deal with. That being said, I'm contemplating putting spray foam in all of the corrugations of the shipping container itself, because you can see all the way down there, and that goes all the way down to the floor. So if some weird little thing occurred back here and a car, managed to slip down into that hole, well, it could possibly go for a ways before, gravity stops it. Actually, no, gravity would be making it go. It would be the floor that stops it. Yeah. It's not the fall that kills things. It's the sudden stop at the end. Yeah. All right. And I got some 2 pieces here, screwed in to support that pink thing there. I got to figure out what I'm going to do on the wall to support it. I'm not really thinking I'm going to drill holes through it. What I think I may do is just get a really heavy duty magnet and then, put like a block of wood or something on the magnet similar to those, and then just put the magnet at the right spot so that this piece of pink foam has another surface to lay on. Because, when it was up in here, get in there, I just kind of had it wedged. So, well, you get the idea. All right, where was we? Good enough. So the tunnel portals on this side, because they are offset so much, I was thinking that I was going to have like a portal here and then just like have another portal here, maybe cut them in half so that they could share the center column, somehow. And I don't know. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of foam here, and I may have to carve into this thing to, carve a little notch in here to give it a place to live. But I'm going to take a piece of foam and just make one big monster portal and then put a poured concrete pillar in the center of it. And actually the pillar will extend in a ways. Far enough in so that it kind of, do you mind? There. Far enough in so that, like when you're in here, like visually interrogating the scene, it disappears beyond what you can see so that you just accept that, that's the way they did it, the engineers. So in other words, they just blasted one big tunnel and then just supported it down the center where it had to be supported. So then the whole face, the whole front here is going to be blasted rock with that concrete beam in the middle and maybe some other pieces of concrete around it to make it believable. But instead of buying tunnel portals and hacking them up and, maybe I don't like it after I get done, wasting 40 or 50 bucks, because the inflation rate right now is just ridiculous. Then I was considering 3D printing them. I got 4 3D printers, so I was like, yeah, I'll just throw it at the 5+ and call it a day. And then I was like going through Thingiverse and here and there, and I'm like, I don't really like any of them. They just didn't really have the feel that I was going for. So I kind of decided here that I'm just going to carve it by hand and just, channel my inner artist and see what we got. So, I think that's it. This little mountain update here. Yeah, so I got the bridges on the way. So once those bridges show up, I will be able to finish mocking up this whole area here. And then once I figure out all the dimensions here, especially the back elevated main line, because remember, this concrete bridge goes up and around and then it ends up where you see that Bachmann AZ track. Oh yeah, one thing I didn't mention. So you'll notice here, come on, T-square, let go. There we go. So here is my S-curve test piece. I believe, yeah, that's all 22-inch radius. So remember when I said that you can fit a 22-inch radius S-curve underneath the bridge? Well, yes, you can, but after all the spacing and everything got worked out here, where that main line is on top of the pink foam there, it ended up, after this S-curve deal, like out in here. Because I needed to put 2 pieces instead of just one curve and then a straight and then, start curving back the other way. I had to put 2 in order to clear the foundations of the viaduct bridge. So that whole S-curve idea is now out the window. That's null and void. So the main line is not going to jut out under the bridge just to be out front for about, 500 yards of HO scale and then go back in. What it's going to do, and then back into a tunnel on the front, it's just going to stay straight along the back wall of the container there, right up close, and just go right back into a tunnel. And then the mountain line above will start curving in toward the wall, and then they're going to be double-decker, in a rock face all the way down. And that way we have plenty of real estate out front for the town and the sawmill, like I said before. And then on the other side of the sawmill, the elevated main line, that one is going to break out from another, from that tunnel and then go out and around and this way. So that's how that's going to go. I'm also kind of entertaining the idea of between the sawmill area and the town, having 2 tunnel portals there with like another valley, where there's like another little stream that goes through and, another little valley there. And in that valley, you have a switch, there's a switch on each side and it comes out, and then we go perpendicular out and across over to the other, on top of the yard here. And that might give me an excuse to use that double track bridge, or a few of them. I've actually got 2 other bare plastic gray ones that aren't painted that maybe I could paint them to match that, and then have them start to come out, and then just figure out like a really long rigid, robust span to go across to the other side here and merge in with that other shelf that I was talking about before. So there's probably going to be another shelf at that elevation somewhere. I want to be able to reach under it and be able to do everything I got to do with the cars and not, be like banging my wrist on anything. So the shelf's going to probably be at this elevation here. And it's just going to be continuation of the mountain line. It's going to be mountainous terrain, coal mines, sawmills, ore mines, what have you, pulp paper, who knows, moonshine stills, all sorts of stuff. And then the further down this way it gets, it's going to, come out of mountain terrain and become, flatlands, and there'll be just agriculture. And then, they'll go all the way to the end. Maybe it'll go all the way to the end and across. And I talked about maybe it'll go over the door, but I mean, the way that this is all here, I think the amount of work required to make that happen would be a little ridiculous, unless I tie it back into the mountain line where that big wide area was, where I talked about building the guardrail. That could be a place, because it's wide enough, we could put a switch in there and get another line off of that. It might work there. Maybe. We'll see. That's down the road. But, yeah. So here is the mountain update. I think this is going to be part 3. And, quite a bit of work since the last one. And I hope you enjoyed seeing it. And I hope you enjoy the ideas. And, if you got anything you're thinking that would be cool, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And comment down below. Comment away. Always like, hearing good ideas and different ways of doing things. Quite the mess here. I mean, the trains definitely aren't running now until, they get the work crews out here to clean this crap up. So, it'll be a while before we hear those engines going around again. But, yeah, all right. That's enough of me, rambling here. So, TechBilly83. Coming to you from the train room on the Techstead, and it's Sunday evening, so hope this makes your work week a little bit more tolerable and enjoyable. Thanks, everybody. Take care. That was supposed to stop. Why didn't it stop?